Smoke 2013 allows you to import timelines that you've created in other nonlinear applications, such as Final Cut Pro 7, Final Cut Pro 10, and Avid Media Composer. Using the AAF file for Media Composer and the XML file format for Final Cut Pro, you can easily import and conform your timelines directly in Smoke 2013. To access the Conform tools, we'll go down to the tabs along the bottom of the UI and I choose Conform. I'm now in the Conform task. The top area is the event list, where you'll see a list of all the different media and all the sources that are being used inside of the sequence once the conform is performed. The bottom area is the sequence area itself, and we'll see the sequence that will be created during the conform process. There's also a preview window that we'll utilize to look at the different clips and our sequence as we perform the conform. Before you can perform an XML or AAF conform, you need to determine what folder in the media library your sequences and footage will be placed. If I go over to the media library where I have a default library, I can right-click Now with that folder selected, I could right-click in the event area or go to the Conform Task menu and click on it to expand it and choose Load New XML or AAF. The Media Import browser will appear and I can now navigate to where my XML or AAF file is. In this video, I'm going to be importing an XML file from Final Cut Pro 7. The workflow is exactly the same for Final Cut Pro 10, and again, if you're using Media Composer, you would export an AAF file from Media Composer. Now before I import this, let's take a look at some of the parameters we have along the bottom of the UI relative to performing the conform. You have the media option. Enable this to create a sequence with track segments that link to the original media. Disable it to import an empty shell showing only the structure of the sequence without reference to any of the files that are in the sequence. With it enabled, you also have the preferred media option. You can choose the original sources, which means you're going to refer back to the original files, or if you're working with the AAF file from Media Composer, you can enable offline intermediates, and then you're going to be working with your intermediates created by Media Composer. I'll set this back to the original sources. And then there are the relative search options, which let you determine what options you should search for when trying to relink the media. Understand that the first search option, whenever importing or conforming an XML or an AAF file, is the actual information in those individual files. If the original media used in your other NLEs has not moved or changed location, the information inside the AAF file or the XML file will let Smoke know where those files are. But more likely, in a case where the files have been moved, this is where you can control how to look for that media. Understand that by default, Smoke will first look at that information in the XML and the AAF file, and it will not perform a search if it finds the media according to the information in those files. Only when the files are not in the same location that the XML and AAF file is telling Smoke will these search options be relevant. Now the XML and the files that I'm using here were created and exported on a different Macintosh system. So the files have obviously been moved to my system, so I need these search options enabled to locate the media. So that's why I'm going to make sure that search and import files is enabled. The next thing to understand is how Smoke will search for that media. The first place it will look is the folder that the XML or the AAF file is actually in, and then it's going to go through all subfolders below the structure of where the XML or the AAF file is. If your media is in a higher level folder in your structure than where the XML file is, you then have the option to add a max up level, which by default is set to 0, meaning it's not going to search any higher than the XML or the AAF file. In a perfect world, we would always have our media right next to our XML and very easily accessible. We know that's not always going to be the case. In fact, I have purposely moved some of the files so that we will find some errors and unlinked media once I perform the conform. That way I can show you how easy it is to go and set a new search directory inside the Conform tab. But for right now, just remember and understand that you have the option to set a max up level, how many folders above this XML file you would like Smoke to search for. Next is the different criteria or options you want to use when doing the search. By default, we are looking for the file name and the frame rate. and this will work very well when importing an XML file. When conforming an AAF file coming from Media Composer, you might want to use the UMID as part of your criteria for the search, which is relative to working with Media Composer. One other setting to be aware of is on the General tab. So I'll go to my General tab to bring it to the front. Just below where it reads General, you'll see the clip options, and there's the cache source media. This option, when enabled, means that Smoke will create intermediates of your files during the import process. When this is off, Smoke is going to be using the original media that is on the hard drive. This option is relevant when performing a conform, just as it is when importing media into your project. I'll leave this off for right now and go back to our sequence import option. So now I've got my settings set. I have link to media files enabled. I have my file name and my frame rate as my search criteria. I also have told it to search and import the files, and I've also asked it to save the sources separately, which means we're going to import individual sources that are from the conform. So with my XML selected, I choose the import option, and you'll see in the lower left corner, it's showing me the actual progress of the conform. Once it's done, we are back in the Conform tab, and we can see several different signs giving us a warning or indication that something is not correct. In the Event view, you can see a list of all the media and the sources that are used inside the sequence. And as I select each one of them, you'll notice the current frame indicator is jumping to that media. Over on the right-hand side, I will enable the Preview option, which now gives me a preview window of my sequence and my media that I have in my event list. And again, as I select a media source, if something is not linked, it's showing me that there is an unlinked media. Inside the event list, you can see the warning signs that are telling me something is not correct. The media is not linked. If the media is found and linked, you will see the linked icon indicating the file has been found and it has been brought in during the conform process. Down inside the sequence, we also have the warning icons telling us the media has not been found and the sources are outlined in red, indicating there is the problem. In my event list, I do not want to see the files that have been found and linked properly. I can enable this option called Hide Link. Now I only see the media or events that are not been linked properly, and I can focus on them. You'll notice there's a flyout that's named Match Criteria, and if I click on this, you'll see all the different criteria options I can choose for the match. And you'll notice the settings are the same as I had set up inside of my Conform tab prior to performing the conform. I had asked for it to find the frame rate and the file name. I can enable and disable these to alter and change the matching criteria for the search. And then just to the left of that, I have the option called Set Search Location. This is how I now can go and set a new location where the files have been moved to. So by clicking this, again, my Set Directory dialog box opens, and now I can navigate to the location of the footage that is missing. Once I am at that folder, I can leave everything set or alter and change it if needed as far as the sequence import options, and I choose Set, and you'll notice now all the media has the green check mark indicating it has found it. But the media that has now been found is not linked to my sequence yet. You can right-click and choose Link Match Sources or link them independently. But I'll choose Link Match Sources, and you'll notice that all the files that were now found are now linked into my sequence. And as I scrub down below, you can see inside of my preview window, all the files are now linked and matched properly. Now I can go to my Timeline tab where I can continue to edit and work with my sequence that I've just brought in through the XML format. Also notice inside of the media library, as I mentioned, the sequence has been brought in and a folder named My Edit Sources has now also been added, and all the different sources have been imported because of the settings I had inside the Conform tab. This is just one example of performing a conform with the XML file.